Hello and welcome back to thejonas.net. My name is Donald Jonas. This is my 6th tutorial on Zentyal 3.0 using the 64-bit edition. Zentyal 3.0 is based upon the Ubuntu 12.4 Server Edition LTS. In this tutorial I'm going to cover setting up a secondary domain controller. Secondary domain controllers, in my opinion, are very important. It creates a needed degree of redundancy. An example of that would be if you had to bring down your primary domain controller for whatever reason, whether that be a firmware, hardware, software configuration, and it's not being utilized, your users will definitely need to authenticate in order to do their job. Whether that's authenticating by logging in, changing a password, or just accessing a network share. So you're going to need a domain controller to handle these requests. So a second domain controller is very important. In an earlier tutorial, under DNS and DHCP, I had set up a server called Server 03. That server has been created, and that is going to be the secondary domain controller. So let me slide that in here. And this now being the secondary domain controller, the only thing I really needed to do was get these two communicating by name, Server 01 and Server 03. So under Network, when you set up your initial configuration of your secondary domain controller, as we did in the first domain controller, and it asks for a domain name, give it the same domain name. I call this test.lan, so it's the same. And under the DNS, we need to verify the IP addresses. Now, the local host is already in there, the 127.0.0.1, and that is grayed out. We also need to add the primary domain controller's IP address, because that is running the DNS, and that is where our records, our A records, are being created by the different clients, and our static host names are our static A records, and that is the primary domain controller's IP address. And under search domain, we'll have to put our primary domain controllers, our domain name, which is test.lan, and that's pretty much it. We can give this a quick test, make sure they're communicating using the name. So this is server 03, and we are looking to ping, P-I-N-G, server 01, and as you can see, it is replying. They are communicating by name. So I can exit out of this, and we're going to scroll down next and go to file sharing. We can give it a name. You can call it whatever you like, backup domain controller. We can save that. And once that is done, we have to set a few more parameters to get this communicating with the primary domain controller. Server role is not going to be a domain controller, it's going to be an additional domain controller. Now I want your primary domain controller's fully qualified domain name, and that will be server1.test.lan. And here is the IP address, the primary domain controller, and administrator account. Remember that administrator account on the primary domain controller? This is an excellent opportunity where you can utilize that account. Just apply the password we had set up, or you had set up in the earlier tutorials, and that is pretty much it. Now we just need to click change, and we'll let you know joining a domain will delete all your user accounts, groups from Zentyal, and import the new domain ones. That is fine. Click OK and save changes. It should take about a minute or so to run. And it's finished. Click OK. So now we have an additional domain controller. Now we can verify this by, I'm going to slide this out of the way and go down to file sharing and do a quick restart. And it's thinking. And once that is finished, I will restart the secondary domain controller. Excellent. And we'll slide this one into position. And we can go under module status. Actually, that was dashboard I was meant to click. And we can restart this one. Now the end result will be under users and groups, we'll see all the users we had created on the primary domain controller now populated over to the secondary domain controller. Under users. And there are all the users we created. And just to test this out, we can call this my test. We're going to create this user on the secondary domain controller and see if it populates over to the primary domain controller. Make sure you can create users in a bounce back and forth. And we can even put my test in the accounting group. See how the accounting group populated over to? And then add. And if you scroll down, you can see my test. And we slide this out of the way. And we're going to scroll down to users and groups. Now we're on the primary domain controller. Server 01, and we did create a user on the backup domain controller. And it should have replicated over to the primary domain controller. And there it is, my test. So that's pretty much it. It's a relatively simple process to create a secondary domain controller. Zentyal has made this very easy for the administrator. This way you have a degree of redundancy, a very strong degree of redundancy. So if users need to authenticate while you're working on one of the domain controllers, you will have a second domain controller running to handle those requests. So thank you for visiting thejonas.net. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you will watch my next tutorial. That'll be my 7th tutorial on joining clients to the domain. By clients, I'm referring to Windows 8, Windows 7, and Ubuntu. And have a nice day. Thank you.